Coming up on a newscast, North Korea held large-scale performances and firework displays to celebrate the 110th birth anniversary of its late founder. There were no signs of military activity such as a parade displaying weapons. From next week, South Korea is lifting all distancing rules except the mask mandate. It's the first time such measures are removed since the pandemic began. The nation will apply for membership to the CPTPP. However, the procedure to join the trade pact could take at least a year. Hello, we're wrapping up the week well. I'm Daniel Che here to bring the latest. Let's begin with our top story. North Korea just held events to mark the 110th birth anniversary of its founder. While many expected a big military parade to mark the occasion, no such activities were detected. Instead, the regime held a big fireworks show. Kim Da-mi starts us off.
North Korea held a large-scale dance performances and fireworks displays on Friday night at Kim Il-sung Square in Pyongyang to celebrate the 110th birth anniversary of the regime's late founder, Kim Il-sung. The North State media aired a live footage of hundreds of thousands of mask-wearing North Koreans dancing, as it reported earlier that morning that Pyongyang will stage a youth ball with a musical performance in commemoration of the so-called Day of the Sun. Fireworks were also scheduled over the banks of the Taedong River after the performances. North Korea usually considers 5th and 10th year anniversaries as key occasions. But contrary to expectations, there were no signs of military activity such as a military parade.
A military parade could take place as part of the anniversary's big celebration, so the North might stage that as the highlight of the event.
Instead, the North may stage a military parade around April 25th to mark the 90th anniversary of its Korean People's Army Foundation Day. Amid the speculation, South Korea's Unification Ministry said Friday that Seoul is keeping close tabs on the North and a possible military parade later this month.
The government is in the process of identifying whether the North is making preparations for a military parade and is closely following any related moves.
North Korea appears to be highlighting Kim Il-sung's birth anniversary with all kinds of events and celebrations during the month of April. But watchers point out that more focus has been placed on the 10th anniversary of the Kim Jong-un regime. The North's recent unveiling of the results of its large-scale construction project also lines up with the 10th anniversary, showing North Korean people the accomplishments of the Kim Jong-un era, as well as elevating Kim to the same rank as his grandfather, the founding leader. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Satellite pictures appear to show North Korea doing excavation work at a nuclear test site which it dismantled several years ago, meaning the regime is likely getting ready for a nuclear test at some point. Han Sung-woo sheds light on this development.
North Korea is showing signs that it's gearing up for its first nuclear test since 2017. That's according to multiple sources, including 38 North, which reported on Thursday U.S. local time that recent satellite images of the regime's Punggye-ri nuclear test sites indicate work is underway to restore Tunnel 3 to operational status, including the addition of 4 new structures since January. The publication also brought up the expansion of a gray-tone spoil pile, something Japanese newspaper Nikkei Shimbun has also taken notice of from satellite imagery. Experts believe what's piled up may be debris from tunnel excavation work.
I wouldn't expect to have a lot of warning as to whether North Korea would conduct a nuclear test. In general, North Korea is going to try to hide those signatures. And so what we see is what we're going to see, which is we'll see the dirt coming out of the tunnel and being dumped at the mouth because there's really no way to hide that. But really, once the nuclear device goes in the tunnel and the cables and other diagnostics go in, there really won't be any external signature.
38 North says, however, the North's investment in support infrastructure suggests long-term plans, not merely a single nuclear test. And domestic experts say it's too early whether or not a test could be imminent.
North Korea's need for nuclear tests in recent days has mainly been about miniaturizing their warheads, adjusting the explosiveness of nuclear materials for the mini warheads. This requires precisely measured experiments that take quite a while. It seems the regime is still at the level of digging and preparing for such a test.
In fact, one analyst believes that even if one is imminent, there's no need to be overly concerned.
In the end, it doesn't hold much real meaning. North Korea's carried out nuclear tests before, and with the data it already has, it can carry out small-scale explosions at will. It's just another show of force, if you ask me. Another demonstration to the world that the regime possesses tactical nuclear weapons.
North Korea had destroyed the Punggye-ri test site in 2018 to show its willingness to denuclearize as it pursued dialogue with the U.S. Despite the regime claiming its facilities were completely demolished, experts at the time said they could potentially be restored. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine has now entered its 8th week. After shifting its focus to the eastern part of the country, Moscow resumed its offensive on Kyiv by attacking the outskirts of the capital. Song Yoo-jin has the latest.
Russia appears to have resumed its attack on Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, claiming that it struck the outskirts of the city with cruise missiles on Friday.
Tonight, high-precision, long-range sea-launched caliber missiles hit a military facility on the outskirts of Kyiv. The number and scale of missile strikes on target in Kyiv will increase in response to any terrorist attacks or sabotage of the Kyiv nationalist regime on Russian territory.
The strikes come at a time when a Russian retaliation is feared after the sinking of its warship Moskva. While Russia says a fire caused the ammunitions on board to explode, Ukraine claims it sank the ship using Neptune anti-ship missiles. Eastern Ukraine, which has become Russia's new focus of the war, has also fallen victim to Moscow's offensive.
The enemy continues to inflict missile and bomb strikes on the infrastructure facilities and residential areas of cities and villages.
As the attacks go on, civilians, especially the vulnerable, are at the crossroads of life and death. The United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities estimated on Thursday that some 2.7 million disabled people in Ukraine are either trapped or abandoned in their homes, at care centers, and at orphanages without basic supplies and medicine. To help Ukraine defend itself, the U.S. is now taking further action. After promising to provide $800 million worth of military assistance, U.S. President Joe Biden said on Thursday local time that the U.S. is considering sending a senior official to Kyiv as a show of support. A source familiar with the matter told Reuters that the official could either be Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin or Secretary of State Antony Blinken, while the White House made it clear that President Biden is not going to visit Ukraine himself. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
The South Korean government announced an end to social distancing effective from next week. Masks will have to stay on for now, but that rule could change soon as well. Choi Min-jung explains further.
South Korea will be lifting all social distancing rules for the first time in over 2 years. Some measures have been in place since March 2020, but now people will be able to enjoy their lives much like they did before the pandemic.
As promised several times, the government has decided to boldly lift social distancing rules, one of the most important antivirus measures, now that the virus situation and the medical system is under control.
Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyum announced Friday that the ban on social gatherings of more than 10 people will be lifted, and businesses will be able to open for 24 hours starting next Monday. This means people can gather with as many people as they want without curfews. Large events, including at places of worship and rallies, can now be held without limits on capacity. And from April 25th, people will also be able to enjoy movies and concerts indoors while having something to eat. However, people will still be required to wear masks at all times. Indoor mask mandates will remain for the time being. Authorities had been considering the lifting of outdoor mask mandates, but they have decided to put that on hold for now. The mask-wearing requirement for outdoors may change after the government assesses the country's virus situation over the next 2 weeks. The eased measures follow a declining number of infections. South Korea reported 125,846 new cases on Friday. The figure has remained in the 100,000 range for 3 days in a row now. We're continuing to see a downward trend as cases drop by more than 22,000 compared to a day ago and by almost 80,000 on week. The number of severely ill patients remains at just under 1,000, and there were 264 additional deaths. The Prime Minister also announced that from April 25th, COVID-19 will be downgraded in its classification of infectious diseases. Currently, it's categorized as a level 1 infectious disease, the highest on the government's 4-tier scale and regarded as the most dangerous. A downgrade to level 2 would mean self-isolation will no longer be mandatory for anyone infected with COVID-19. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
From the end of April, COVID-19 will no longer be classified as the most dangerous disease in South Korea. This means those infected needn't stay at home for 7 days. Bae-eun-ji zooms in on other changes to come in dealing with the virus.
Starting late May, people who test positive for COVID-19 in South Korea will no longer have to go through the week-long mandatory quarantine. They will be also able to receive treatment at local clinics and hospitals, just like any other disease. This also means that the country will no longer cover the medical costs in full for COVID-19 patients.
The 7-day mandatory quarantine will be lifted and the requirement for at-home recovery will also be removed. Medical costs will be covered by the National Health Insurance Program and patients will be responsible for paying them. But non-face-to-face treatment services will still be in place for those in need.
This is because COVID-19 will no longer be categorized as a level 1 infectious disease. Starting April 25th, it'll be downgraded to level 2. Then, after about a month-long transition period, South Koreans will slowly be able to go back to normal. Also, starting June, travelers entering South Korea will only need to get a PCR once, on the first day of their arrival. This will also apply to those who are not vaccinated. But travelers will still need to have a negative PCR test within 48 hours before departure. Right now, overseas travelers have to take a PCR test on the day of their arrival and then also take a rapid antigen test about a week after they have entered Korea. Bae-eun-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea is moving forward to join the CPTPP. The decision was made on Friday in a meeting of related ministers. Kim Hyun-sung sheds light on the significance of becoming a part of the mega trading bloc.
It's April, South Korea's self-imposed deadline to submit an application to join the CPTPP. CPTPP stands for Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, and it's one of the world's largest trading blocs. The CPTPP is made up of 11 member nations, including Japan, Canada, and Mexico, and it's responsible for roughly 15% of the world's trade. Joining the bloc has been on South Korea's agenda since last December.
Considering the economic and strategic value of expanding trade and investment and our status as an open trading nation, we plan to officially start the process of joining CPTPP, as well as social discussions on this matter with various stakeholders.
The Finance Ministry finally announced on Friday that the government has finished its discussions and has carried out a full evaluation of the economic effects. And economic ministers made the firm decision to move forward with the bid during Friday's written meeting. But South Korea's journey ahead to join the bloc is expected to be bumpy. And not everybody is on board. The agricultural and fisheries sector, for one, has voiced its discontent. It fears that the cheap imports will become a threat to people's livelihoods. The concern also lies with seafood imports from Japan. South Korea has banned seafood imports from areas that have been affected by the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster. But joining the CPTPP may mean that South Korea would have to lift that ban, like Taiwan did earlier this year in efforts to join the bloc. The ministry said it is mindful of these concerns and will make the necessary steps to protect people's health and safety. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol plans to expand diplomacy so that it's commensurate with the country's status economically and culturally. The remarks were made in an interview published Thursday by the Washington Post. Yoon pointed out South Korea has been a passive player globally and been too wary of its aggressive neighbors, North Korea and China. He emphasized Seoul will not only focus on Pyongyang but expand diplomacy with the EU and Asia based on bolstering the Seoul-Washington alliance. The incoming leader highlighted that the nation will take on a greater role on global issues, including supply chains, climate change, and vaccine production. President-elect Yoon visited one of the main groups representing the nation's labor movement, the Federation of Korean Trade Unions. There he promised to build a society in which the value of labor is respected. Also on Friday, he met with a new British ambassador. Yoon Jung-min tells us more.
President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol promised to make sure his policies reflect the opinions of workers, saying a country that does not put a proper value on labor cannot develop sustainably. He was speaking Friday to the Federation of Korean Trade Unions.
또 여러분과 함께 노동의 가치가 제대로 존중받고 노동자가 당당한 그런 사회를 만들 수 있도록 제가 드린 약속을 실천해 나가겠습니다.
He added he would remain an unchanging friend of the FKTU, urging them to make their voices heard on labor issues. Yoon nominated a former chief of the FKTU, Lee Jung-sik, as labor minister on Thursday. During his campaign, Yoon had expressed support for a time-off system that would guarantee pay for people in the public sector who work full-time for their unions, as well as union representation on the boards of public institutions. The labor union chief called for an active role from the new government, noting that the pandemic has taken a toll on many workers.
The Federation of Korean Trade Unions will actively engage in dialogue with the new government on all issues without being constrained by any framework. Let's have a conversation as a step in building trust.
President-elect Yoon met on the same day at his office with the new British ambassador to Seoul, Colin Crooks, with whom he discussed bilateral cooperation. The ambassador congratulated the president-elect and Yoon welcomed him to his new post in Seoul. Prior to the appointment, Crooks served as ambassador to North Korea.
그리고 북한 대사에서 또 이렇게 대한민국 대사로 발령받으시고 축하드립니다.
감사합니다. 감사합니다.
They reportedly agreed on the need to expand the friendship between their two governments. President-elect Yoon had earlier called for cooperation in addressing the North Korean nuclear issue when he met Ambassador Crooks during his campaign in December. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
The National Assembly passed a bill that will test run a new system for regional and city councils where 3 to 5 council members will be elected in a single constituency. In addition, lawmakers also moved to start a special probe over a sexual assault case that led to a military member's suicide. Kim Do-yeon has the full story.
South Korean politics took a step on Friday towards opening the doors to small parties to be involved in local politics.
I hereby announce that the amendments to the Public Official Election Act have been passed.
Currently, the law says the number of council members per regional district has to be between 2 to 4, and most districts and local city councils get 2 members each, leading to candidates from the main 2 parties being voted in. For reference, currently of Gyeonggi-do province's 31 counties or cities, there are 390 council members directly elected into the position. Of them, 252 are from the Democratic Party of Korea, while 128 of them are from the People Power Party. Only 10 come from small parties like the Justice Party. But the new system will give 11 districts nationwide 3 to 5 members as a test, so smaller parties can get in. This includes the first constituency of the Seocheogu district in Seoul. In addition, lawmakers abolished the law that lets provincial governments divide districts of 4 members into 2 districts of 2 members. The rule had served to ensure that candidates who placed 3rd or 4th were unlikely to win. The debate over this bill was fierce, and the agreement among lawmakers was pushed to the last minute as Friday was realistically a deadline for any changes of rules pertaining to the upcoming local election. Now, the stage is set, and just around a month since a nationwide election, the country heads into the next one. In addition to this law, other laws for the local election included adding more seats in provincial and metropolitan and regional councils. Also, a bill was passed to open a special probe into a sexual assault case linked to the suicide of an Air Force Master Sergeant last year, after a months-long investigation into the case failed to satisfy the victim's family. The probe will focus on verifying any possible criminal actions by suspects accused of botching the initial investigation or bullying the victim. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The Finance Ministry believes geopolitical issues pose risks to the local economy. Supply chain disruptions have led to higher prices, which could hurt demand. But there are encouraging indicators in exports and employment. Also, the economy will get a boost with distancing rules removed. Lee Dae-hyun provides a deeper analysis.
The Ministry of Economy and Finance expressed deep concerns over the outlook of South Korea's economy. In its monthly Green Book report released on Friday, the ministry said that the spread of the Omicron variant and supply chain issues could further slow down domestic demand. The ministry has been expressing concerns on COVID-19's negative impact on domestic demand for 5 months now. Consumer price hikes were also one of the ministry's main concerns. Consumer prices in March increased 4.1% compared to the same period last year, seeing their largest rise in more than 10 years. One expert says raising the base interest rate is essential to tame this inflation.
As global supply chain issues and Russia's invasion of Ukraine are driving inflation, raising the base rate is a way to ease consumer difficulties.
Production for mining and manufacturing industries increased 0.6% in February from last month, but with the service sector falling 0.3%, production for all industries has dropped 0.2%. However, there were optimistic signs as well in terms of exports and employment. The number of people who were in jobs in March increased by 831,000 compared to the same period last year. With the unemployment rate dropping 1.3 percentage points from last year to 3%, the employment rate also soared 2.1 percentage points on year to 67.8%. Exports in March saw strong growth, rising 18.2% on year on the back of semiconductors and petrochemicals. The Composite Consumer Sentiment Index, which indicates the level of optimism that consumers have about the performance of the economy, also improved 0.1 percentage points in March to 103.2 from last month. The ministry also said that the lifting of social distancing measures will have a positive effect on the economy.
In terms of the lifting of social distancing measures, we are predicting that this will eventually lead to an increase in consumer spending.
Despite these optimistic figures, the ministry said there are still concerns due to the economic impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the interest rate rise in the U.S., and the lockdown of Shanghai, and that the government will devote all efforts to minimizing the harm to the South Korean economy by managing consumer prices and supporting affected sectors. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
The 2022 Seoul Marathon is here. Organized by the city, the Korea Athletics Foundation, and the Dongailbo, this year's race will bring together 131 professional runners from 9 countries. The main event is on Sunday. It starts downtown at Gwanghwamun Plaza. On Saturday and Sunday, there's also a virtual race in which anyone can take part. Individual participants can choose to run wherever and whenever during the 2 days and record their runs using GPS tracking applications. Runners can get their records registered and verified on the event's official website and get a medal. Around 21,000 people have signed up so far.
This weekend will be superbly sunny and mild here in South Korea. Temperatures will be climbing to 19 degrees Celsius tomorrow and 21 degrees by Sunday. Under sunny skies, keep in mind that UV radiation will also be strong for most regions. Make sure to wear plenty of sunblock when heading out. Clean air will take over across the nation for this weekend. Air quality will stand in the normal to good category nationwide. For those across the coastlines, please be aware of gusty offshore winds. In particular, for the coastlines of Jeju Island and the East Coast, a combination of strong winds and high waves are in the forecast. For those planning on fishing or boating, please make sure to refer to the latest weather forecast. Morning lows in Seoul and Gwangju will start off at 8 degrees Celsius. As for the daily highs, Daejeon will get up to 20 degrees, Daegu and Gyeongju will be topping out at 21 degrees Celsius. Wide temperature gaps are expected for the time being, but daytime conditions will stay warm overall. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That's all from us. As always, thank you for watching.